For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On a sweltering summer afternoon, 12-year-old Sienna and 14-year-old Leila Duarte were last seen scrambling into a side canyon off the Virgin River in Zion National Park. They never returned. As flash flood sirens blared and crowds rushed for higher ground, the junior hikers vanished. Despite an extensive investigation spanning federal and local agencies, Sienna and Leila Duarte vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the haunting question of their fate. For 7 agonizing years, their family lived with agonizing uncertainty, clinging to a fading hope. Then, 7 years later, a discovery was made, revealing a chilling new chapter in their disappearance. This is the complete investigation into what happened to Sienna and Leila Duarte, and the dark truth that lay hidden in Zion. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this content, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's continue. Zion National Park rises from the Utah desert like a cathedral carved by ancient forces, its colossal sandstone cliffs painted in hues of crimson and cream, sculpted over millennia by wind and water. The Virgin River, a ribbon of life, meanders through its canyons, drawing millions of visitors each year to witness its majestic beauty and explore its renowned hiking trails. It is a place of profound natural grandeur, a sanctuary for those seeking adventure and solace amidst the towering formations. Among the countless families drawn to this natural wonder were Sienna and Leila Duarte, 12 and 14 years old respectively. Both were junior hikers, their youthful enthusiasm for the outdoors evident in their bright eyes and readiness for exploration. They possessed an inherent curiosity for the natural world, a shared passion that often led them deep into the park's more secluded paths. On a warm afternoon in late summer, the tranquil majesty of Zion was abruptly shattered. Without warning, a series of piercing flash flood sirens echoed through the canyon, their urgent wail signaling imminent danger. The sky had darkened rapidly, and the Virgin River, usually a gentle companion, began to swell with alarming speed. A sudden, torrential downpour in the upper reaches of the watershed was transforming the serene waterways into a raging, destructive force. Panic rippled through the crowds of visitors. Families, couples, and solo adventurers alike began a frantic scramble for higher ground, their leisurely strolls replaced by a desperate flight from the rapidly encroaching deluge. The once orderly paths became choked with people, all pushing uphill, their faces etched with fear as the roar of the surging water grew louder. Amidst this chaos, Sienna and Leila Duarte were last observed near a side canyon, a narrow slot offering a deceptive promise of refuge. As the waters rose, transforming the main canyon floor into a torrent, the sisters were seen clambering into the confined opening, seeking an elevated alcove or a ledge above the immediate danger. Their small forms vanished into the shadowed fissure, a final glimpse before they were swallowed by the monumental scale of the landscape and the escalating natural disaster. When the floodwaters finally receded hours later, leaving behind a scarred and debris-strewn landscape, the immediate and heartbreaking reality began to set in. The throngs of visitors slowly accounted for themselves, but Sienna and Leila Duarte were nowhere to be found. The sisters had vanished. The immediate aftermath of the flood saw Zion National Park transform from a site of natural beauty into a grim search zone. As the turbulent waters retreated, a frantic, large-scale search operation commenced. Park rangers, led by the seasoned ranger Cade Sorensen, coordinated with emergency services and a growing contingent of dedicated volunteers. They combed the affected areas, meticulously navigating the debris-strewn canyon floors and the newly exposed, treacherous terrain. Every crevice, every pile of sediment, every washed-out path became a point of intense scrutiny, fueled by a desperate hope to find Sienna and Leila Duarte. The environment itself presented formidable challenges. The flash flood had reshaped the landscape, depositing vast fields of tangled branches, eroded soil, and dislodged boulders. Familiar trails were obliterated, replaced by unstable ground and new, dangerous currents in residual pooling water. Search teams faced not only the physical exhaustion of traversing such a difficult terrain, but also the psychological toll of finding nothing. The powerful force of the flood made it plausible that the girls could have been swept miles downstream, or conversely, trapped in an inaccessible pocket within one of the many narrow slot canyons where they were last seen. Initial theories centered on these possibilities: that the sisters had either succumbed to the flood's immense power, their bodies carried away by the torrent, or that they had found momentary refuge in a remote alcove, now cut off and isolated. Ranger Sorensen, drawing on years of experience in wilderness search and rescue, understood the unforgiving nature of such an event in Zion. Despite the exhaustive efforts, however, no definitive trace of the girls emerged. There were no backpacks, no articles of clothing, no footprints beyond the initial chaotic scramble of the crowd. The heartbreaking absence of any physical evidence turned the case into a baffling missing persons incident, defying conventional search protocols. To better understand the flood's dynamics and potential paths of victims, park authorities consulted Dr. Yasmin Omar, a renowned flood engineer. Her expertise in hydrological modeling offered insights into the sheer force and unpredictable nature of the water that day, reinforcing the terrifying power of the natural event. Yet, even with scientific analysis, the ultimate fate of Sienna and Leila Duarte remained an agonizing mystery. The frantic, exhaustive search for Sienna and Leila Duarte eventually succumbed to the relentless march of time. Days blurred into weeks, then weeks into months, each passing moment eroding the desperate hope that had initially fueled the teams. The vast, indifferent wilderness of Zion had offered no further clues, no definitive answers. Without any physical evidence of the girls' fate, no bodies, no personal effects, no sign of struggle beyond the natural chaos of the flood, the official narrative solidified. Sienna and Leila were classified as missing, presumed lost to the elements. The powerful flash flood, a force capable of reshaping entire canyons, became the most logical, albeit tragic, explanation for their disappearance. The absence of any contradictory evidence allowed this theory to take root, however unsatisfying it was for those who knew the girls. For the Duarte family, this official presumption offered no solace, only an unbearable limbo. The initial shock gave way to a gnawing, persistent anguish, a void that no amount of time or official pronouncements could fill. They were left with an enduring tapestry of unanswered questions, a perpetual state of grief without the painful finality of closure. Every rustle of leaves, every distant siren, every unknown face sparked a momentary, agonizing flicker of hope, only to be extinguished by the harsh reality. As the years accumulated, the intense media spotlight that had once illuminated their plight began to dim. National attention, ever fickle, shifted to other breaking stories, and the case of the two sisters vanished in Zion gradually receded from public consciousness. It became another unresolved mystery in the park's long and storied history, a somber footnote in the annals of missing persons. Yet within the tight-knit community surrounding Zion, the memory of Sienna and Leila persisted, a quiet sorrow that lingered in the air. Shuttle driver Gramps Harker, a fixture on the park's scenic drive for decades, often spoke of the girls in hushed tones, recalling the vibrant energy of the pre-flood days and the collective despair that followed. For locals like Gramps, the sisters were never truly forgotten. Their story remained a poignant reminder of the park's raw power and the fragility of life within its majestic, yet sometimes unforgiving, embrace. The active investigation may have wound down, but the mystery and the pain it inflicted continued. 5 years had passed since the devastating flood, 5 years of silence that had cemented the official narrative of a tragic accident. The case of the Duarte sisters had settled into the somber annals of Zion's history, a painful memory for those who knew the girls, and a fading one for the wider public. Then, without warning, a single, perplexing discovery shattered the quiet resignation. A park maintenance worker, conducting routine inspections along a less frequented hiking path, paused beneath a rustic wooden footbridge spanning a dry creek. His gaze fell upon something unusual, firmly affixed to the underside of a handrail. It was a small silver pendant, intricately crafted, bearing the etched initials and L intertwined. The design was distinctive, unmistakably belonging to the kind of personalized jewelry often exchanged between close friends or family. But it was not merely found. It was deliberately placed. The pendant was epoxy-glued with considerable force to the wood, a stark contrast to an item simply lost or swept there by the elements. Its position, hidden yet accessible, spoke of calculated intent rather than random chance. The implications were immediate and chilling. This was not an item lost to a natural disaster. It was an item deliberately placed, a macabre message or a misplaced trophy. The long-held theory of Sienna and Leila being swept away by the floodwaters began to crumble, replaced by the terrifying specter of abduction or foul play. The discovery transformed the nature of the case from a tragic accident into a potential criminal investigation. For the Duarte family, the news was a cruel twist, reigniting a flicker of hope for answers alongside a profound, sickening dread for what those answers might reveal. The perplexing clue sent a shockwave through the park service. Ranger Cade Sorensen, who had reluctantly closed the active search years prior, now found himself dusting off the cold file. The pendant represented a deliberate human action, challenging every assumption that had guided the initial, exhaustive search. The case, once a tragic footnote, was now a live investigation, demanding a complete reevaluation of every piece of information, every witness account, and every inch of the vast, unforgiving landscape. The question was no longer if the girls had succumbed to the flood, but who had taken them, and why was this single, defiant clue left behind? The small silver pendant, bearing the intertwined initials and L, became the crucible of the renewed investigation. Forensic teams meticulously examined its surface for any trace of DNA, fingerprints, or microscopic fibers that might link it to an individual. Its distinct epoxy residue was analyzed, hoping to identify a brand or composition that could narrow down its origin. This single, defiant object, deliberately placed, shattered the comforting, albeit tragic, narrative of a natural disaster and forced investigators to confront a far more disturbing possibility. Ranger Cade Sorensen, now operating under a chilling new premise, ordered a complete reevaluation of every aspect of the initial search. The sites of the disappearance and the pendant's discovery, once seen through the lens of a flood-ravaged landscape, were revisited with a criminal mindset. Detectives painstakingly scoured the footbridge and its surroundings, searching for additional clues, however minute, that might have been overlooked in the original, frantic search for accident victims. Old witness statements were pulled from archives and re-examined, not for details of the flood, but for any mention of unusual individuals, vehicles, or suspicious behavior in the days leading up to, and immediately following, the sisters' disappearance. The investigation actively worked to dismantle the previous flood-centric theories. The powerful forces of nature, once the primary suspect, now served as a potential cover for human malice. The focus shifted dramatically from the uncontrollable chaos of the Virgin River to the deliberate, malevolent actions of an individual. The paramount question became, who had placed the pendant there, when, and most importantly, why? Was it a taunt, a desperate cry for attention, or a miscalculation by someone attempting to control a narrative? Every person who had been near Zion that fateful day, and in the years since, was potentially a new lead. Shuttle driver Gramps Harker, with his encyclopedic knowledge of the park's hidden trails and its transient population, was re-interviewed, his casual observations now taking on potentially critical significance. Even Dr. Yasmin Omar's flood models were re-examined, not for where the water carried the girls, but for where it might have concealed an opportunist's actions, or how the flood's chaos could have been exploited by someone with sinister intent. The new investigation looked at everything with fresh, skeptical eyes, turning over every stone in a desperate bid to understand the message left behind and the person who sent it. 7 agonizing years had passed since Sienna and Leila Duarte vanished into the chaos of Zion's flash flood, years that had slowly calcified hope into a grim acceptance. Then, a phone call, a sighting, a miracle. Leila Duarte was home. The news erupted like a seismic event, shaking the foundations of a cold case and reverberating across the nation. Her appearance, gaunt and shadowed by an unspeakable ordeal, brought an immediate, intense focus. The Park Service, the FBI, and the entire nation held its breath as Leila, though fragile, began to speak. Her words, initially fragmented and hesitant, slowly coalesced into a narrative far more sinister than any natural disaster. She spoke of a man, a drifter who had taken them, not the flood. He was a phantom, elusive, with an uncanny understanding of the park's hidden arteries. Leila described how he meticulously collected flood debris, not to survive, but to erase their tracks, to create a false narrative for anyone who might search. He moved his camps with practiced stealth, always above the well-trodden paths of the Narrows, utilizing ancient cattle trails known only to a select few, avoiding detection by the ongoing search parties. The drifter, Leila revealed, was a cunning and calculated predator, leveraging the natural disaster as a cloak for his horrific actions. He kept things, she explained, small mementos, trophies of his cruel dominion. Though she did not explicitly name it, the pendant with the twin initials, found years later, now resonated with a chilling new significance, its deliberate placement no longer a mystery but a grotesque signature. Leila's testimony unequivocally confirmed that the sisters were not victims of nature's wrath, but of a calculated abduction. The long-held presumption of an accidental drowning shattered, replaced by the grim, undeniable truth of human evil. After 7 years, the first true answers had finally emerged, but they brought with them a terrible, unspoken secret about Sienna's fate. Leila Duarte's harrowing testimony ignited an immediate, relentless manhunt. The fragmented details she provided, though born of trauma, were precise. A drifter, his meticulous method of erasing tracks with flood debris, and his clandestine network of camps along ancient cattle paths high above the Narrows. These were not random locations. They spoke of an intimate, sinister knowledge of Zion's most secluded and unforgiving terrain. Every ranger, every law enforcement officer, now knew precisely what, and who, they were hunting. The vast resources of the Park Service, federal agencies, and local law enforcement converged, focused by Leila's chilling map of her captivity. Within days, guided by Leila's recollections and the relentless ground search, authorities located one of the drifter's former encampments, hidden deep within a remote, elevated canyon. The discovery confirmed the terrible secret Leila had carried for 7 years. It was there, amidst the remnants of a makeshift shelter, that the remains of Sienna Duarte were tragically found. The younger sister had not survived the ordeal. Leila's return brought not only the miracle of survival, but also the devastating, undeniable truth of her sister's fate, finally offering the Duarte family a horrifying but definitive answer to their agonizing questions. The drifter, identified as a transient with a history of minor offenses and a profound ability to evade detection, was apprehended shortly thereafter. Cornered in a desolate section of the park he had once considered his sanctuary. His capture brought an end to his reign of terror and initiated the long, arduous process of justice. Though the legal proceedings would be complex, Leila's unwavering testimony, corroborated by the physical evidence, ensured his swift conviction. For the Duarte family, Leela's return was a profound, bittersweet paradox. The joy of having one daughter back was inextricably intertwined with the unbearable grief for the other. Their journey toward healing would be long, scarred by the trauma and the haunting memory of what had been lost. The case also cast a long shadow over Zion National Park. It forced a re-evaluation of visitor safety, not just against the unpredictable forces of nature, but against the hidden dangers that lurked within its majestic, yet sometimes vulnerable, expanses. Leela Duarte, a child who vanished, returned a survivor, her bravery in revealing the truth forever altering the narrative of two sisters lost in Zion, transforming it from a natural tragedy into a chilling testament to human resilience and the enduring power of a secret finally brought to light.